Do you ever feel like something feels a little bit off when it comes to your health? Maybe your weight is spiraling out of control despite your best efforts, or maybe it's that you just don't feel good some of the time and you're not really sure why. Chances are there's something going on with your blood sugar and insulin levels. And that's why in today's episode, we're going to take a deep dive with Danielle Hamilton into some of the early warning signs of blood sugar and insulin issues. Welcome to the Ditch the Carbs podcast, brought to you by Thinlicious. I'm your host, Ruth Sukup, and here we'll talk about everything from the science of weight loss and metabolic flexibility to practical tips for making your health a priority in the midst of a very busy life. It's the perfect blend of insightful education, practical application, and good old-fashioned motivation. So buckle up, friend, because it's about to get real. Hey there, and welcome to the Ditch the Carbs podcast. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ruth Sukup, and I am the founder of Thinlicious and the Thin Adapted System, as well as the New York Times bestselling author of 7 books. And in today's episode, we're going to be taking a deep dive into a topic that is so critical to our health and yet so misunderstood and often ignored: blood sugar. Because honestly, if you've been struggling with your weight or your energy, or if you just don't feel good a lot of the time, then chances are pretty good that there's something going on with your blood sugar. And so today we're going to be chatting with Danielle Hamilton, who is a functional nutritional therapy practitioner and restorative wellness practitioner who specializes in blood sugar regulation and digestion. She first became interested in blood sugar issues when she learned that insulin resistance was at the root of her own PCOS, and she was able to reverse her PCOS, cystic acne, PMS, and weight loss resistance by reversing her insulin resistance. Now her mission is to help others uncover their blood sugar and insulin issues, since most people don't know the early signs, as well as to help them optimize digestion for low-carb diets. She's all about taking a holistic approach that goes way beyond just changing your macros. She's also the host of the Unlock the Sugar Shackles podcast and the creator of the Blood Sugar Mastery Program. In other words, she's amazing and so smart and so knowledgeable about this topic. And so without further ado, here is my interview with Danielle Hamilton. Danielle, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here. I'm really excited.
I am so excited to talk about this topic. So, because I get real geeky when it comes to this kind of stuff. I don't know about you.
Yeah.
But before we talk just about all those early warning signs of blood sugar and insulin, which I think are going to be so fascinating for people, can you first give us kind of the quick and dirty overview of your journey, your philosophy around sugar, your philosophy around ketogenic diets and low carb living? How did you actually discover this way of eating and living, and what has it done for you in your life? How did you get so passionate about blood sugar?
Yeah. Okay. So let me try to make this concise and stick to the exciting bullet points here. So growing up, I grew up in the late 80s and 90s, and it was the low fat era. And I had all the, breakfast foods and cereal foods and toaster strudels and Eggo waffles. And these were all my favorites. And I always thought that I just had a sweet tooth. And I grew up and I was kind of a sickly kid. I had a lot of strep throat and just illnesses. I took tons of antibiotics. And I really, like I said, described myself as, having a sweet tooth and always wanting to eat those sugary foods. And I was always drawn towards carbohydrates. And as I got older, all these sicknesses started to get worse. I had a lot of strep throat. I had to get my tonsils out. I started getting allergies and asthma when I went to college. I had to take multiple prescription medications. I was getting chronic sinus infections. I had multiple inhalers I was on. I had to get allergy shots. I was allergic to so many things that I was developing new ones despite getting the shots. I was giving myself 5 allergy shots in the stomach every other day on top of 5 prescription medications. I was a mess. And it was my early 20s. It was like where I was working as a speech therapist in a nursing home at the time. And I looked around and I saw all my patients had these long lists of diagnoses and these even longer lists of medications. And I saw all my medications, I saw all my diagnoses. And I said, this is inevitable. This is what I'm going to end up like if something doesn't change. And so somehow I heard of what's called the paleo diet. And I read this book by Rob Wolf called The Paleo Diet Solution, and it turned everything that I knew on its head. And it literally almost flipped the food pyramid for me, right? So we shouldn't have 11 servings of all those grains, and we need to embrace fat, and we need to embrace eating animal protein. And I was the person who was always trying to lose weight, and I had, granola bars with me. I was snacking all the time because I had to eat those 6 meals to keep my metabolism going. And I would have, crackers and all the low fat stuff because that's what I was told. That's what they told you in the,
yes.
In the
we were all told that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know.
Yeah, I remember like SnackWells and, low 100 calorie packs, like everything was about calories and avoiding fat. And I was never satiated. I have some binge eating issues, and I was really struggling with my health. And then, so I found the paleo diet, and it was like magic because everything got better. I no longer had allergies, no longer had asthma. I got off all my medications. I stopped giving myself the shots, and I never had a sinus infection again. It was just like a miracle. I was like, oh my goodness. And so because I experienced such a transformative experience with my health, I wanted to, shout this from the rooftops. And I was talking to everyone, like, do you know that processed food is so bad for you and all these things and that you can heal yourself? And I used to have tendonitis in my ankle, and I never got tendonitis again. Like, I was in physical therapy for months on end. I was in a boot my senior year of college because of tendonitis, never got it again after I changed my diet. So I was just fully bought in. So I had a really difficult year, the year after I started eating paleo, and I had really high stress levels. And all of a sudden I was really tired in the morning. I had no energy all day. I lost my period for over 6 months. I had always had some acne, but now it was just intense. It was all on my cheeks, on my forehead. It wasn't just a little bit with my cycles. I was like, I thought acne should be getting better as I'm getting older, but mine was getting worse. And I was gaining weight, and I was just like, what is happening? Because this diet just healed me. So my natural instinct was to say, well, because this diet worked for me once, why don't I just paleo harder? And so since nothing changed, nothing changed. So I looked at my symptoms, and it turns out that I had polycystic ovarian syndrome, or PCOS. And this was, the loss of the period, the acne, the weight gain. And some other people get symptoms of hair loss and facial hair. I didn't have those hair symptoms, but I had all the other ones. And it was really, really hard on me. And I had no energy, and I just felt all this like adrenal fatigue type symptoms. And so I realized that I was way, way, way overeating carbohydrates. And I didn't realize that until I had heard someone say on a podcast that PCOS is the diabetes of the ovaries. And I was like, what are you talking about? I had tried for years to fix my PCOS, trying to still paleo harder and do this, but nothing changed. So finally I realized
paleo, sorry to interrupt you, but just clarification, paleo, you can still eat carbohydrates.
Yeah.
Right?
So let me tell you what I was eating my paleo diet, right? Because with paleo, they're saying eat real food, but paleo is a template, and it's something that needs to be customized. So my paleo diet included loads of fruit and plantains and sweet potatoes and kombucha and coconut sugar and acai bowls and smoothies and more like bananas blended in my iced coffee. I mean, just an insane amount of sugar, but I thought it was healthy sugar, right? How many times have we heard that? Like, they're healthy carbs, and they can be, but in the quantity that I was eating, I was totally overdoing it. So I never paid attention to that ever. I always skipped the blood sugar sections of books. I kind of glossed over because I'm like, this doesn't have to do with me. I don't have diabetes. I don't have to care about my blood sugar because I don't have a problem. Basically, I was just kind of confused about it. So I didn't want to learn about it. And I realized that I was completely overeating carbohydrates for my body's tolerance at that time. And I didn't realize, but I had all these symptoms. So I was thinking, okay, if I have PCOS, which is like pretty advanced insulin resistance at this point, pretty advanced blood sugar issues driving this, I'm like, what are the blood sugar symptoms? I'm like, I don't know what they are. And I would ask my friends, I'm like, do you know what it's like to have signs of blood sugar issues? No one could tell me. No one knows. And I still feel that way. Like no one knows. So this is my big thing. So I looked back and I said, I have to have symptoms. So I learned about it and I was like, oh yeah, I have symptoms for sure. So I'd wake up shaking. I'd wake up super shaky and I'd need to eat immediately the second I woke up. I'd have coffee and I'd start shaking again. And I didn't know what that was. I tested my blood sugar and it was very low. So my blood sugar was super low and it would go low again after coffee because coffee for a lot of people can spike your blood sugar because of the caffeine and the cortisol release. So it spikes it and then mine dropped. Then I was that person who always had some sort of food with me in my bag, like granola bar purse kind of a person. And then once I did paleo, it was like a Lara bar. So I always had something on me. I could never leave the house without food. I was always thinking about where my next meal was coming from. If I was going out to eat, I would eat before I went out to eat because I couldn't tolerate feeling hungry because my hunger was unhealthy hunger. My hunger was a blood sugar crash and I didn't realize that. So I would get really irritable if I was getting hungry. I was a person who could never dream of skipping a meal. I was always having to eat multiple times. And then I was kind of like self-medicating in a way where I would just sort of go into the kitchen and grab a handful of this and walk past, a candy bowl, just grab a piece or have some almonds, or I was always having something because I always needed that little boost to get my blood sugar up because my tendency was what happened was I had a lot of insulin and it was pushing my blood sugar down. And so I didn't struggle with high blood sugars. I had low blood sugars. And when I went to the doctor for all my PCOS blood work, my blood sugar came back at like 60, which is very low. And no doctor said anything to me. 3 times I have that documented from that year. No doctor said a thing to me. And meanwhile, I hated fasting blood work because I felt like I was going to pass out. I never went that long without food unless I had to. And I remember getting back into my car one time after blood work and I kind of like stepped backwards. Like I almost fell back because I was about to pass out. And meanwhile, I was like, oh, I hate fasting. Like I'm just a person who needs to eat breakfast. I'm just a person with a sweet tooth. I'm just a person who likes to snack. Like we think that these are personality traits, but they're really not. And so I adopted a ketogenic diet. I switched my paleo to a whole foods, paleo ketogenic diet, basically taking out those dense carb sources and replacing with more fats. And it was like a miracle because it took a little bit to transition there, right? My blood sugar was low the first several days, but I really started to feel so much better. I could go longer without eating. I didn't have binging anymore. I didn't think about food. It took me a while again to get rid of cravings because I thought again, that was just who I was, but no, that was my body. So I really, I finally got rid of cravings and I could actually take something and like have a bite and be like, no, I don't want any more. That was not me. I was a finish the whole bag of chocolate chips kind of a gal.
Like for the first time in your life.
First time in my life ever that I could ever just like have a little bit of something. I'm like, oh, okay. I could put it down. I was like, who am I? It was a complete change in this identity that I always considered myself. And that was just me with my blood sugar issues. And I thought that's how I was. I thought that was permanent. And meanwhile, I didn't even know the levels of health and sort of freedom from food that I could achieve by stabilizing my blood sugar and my insulin levels. So it was amazing.
Wow. It's
and then I got my period back and I reversed my PCOS and that whole thing
all
too.
this stuff.
Yeah. And I another thing that I struggled with, which I always forget to mention in the before, is that I had really bad PMS and PMDD. I would break up with whoever I was dating right before my period. I would have horrible cramps and breast tenderness and bloating. I mean, I feel like I would go up an entire clothing size, how bloated I used to get before my cycle. And after several months of doing keto and fasting, I no longer had any bloating before my period, no breakouts before my period, never got another pimple really again. I don't even know my cycle is coming unless the app on my phone is like, your next cycle is about to begin. I'm like, oh, really? Because I don't even notice. And I, again, did not think that was possible. I just thought that a period meant cramps and basically hell for a week, but it doesn't have to be that way. It could just, you don't even notice that you have it.
Incredible.
Yeah. So
that's incredible. Powerful. Like to think, I mean, you use that word freedom and like the freedom from all of these things that you didn't even realize you were chained by. Like your whole life was controlled by, when am I going to have my next meal? When am I going to have more food? And I think so 100%. Many of us operate that way. And without even realizing it, we don't realize that that's dictating our entire life and what's possible for you when that doesn't control your life. Because if you don't know, if that's all you've ever known, you don't even fathom what the difference is when you are like, oh man, it's 6 o'clock at night and I haven't eaten all day. I guess I should probably have some dinner. But right, like you can't even fathom what that's like. What can you do with your life when you're not thinking about food like the majority of your waking hours? That's so well said. Yeah, that's such a good point, is that we have so much more, like I can't describe the amount of more mental space that I have. It's not like I go into the grocery store, and before it was always this debate with my sugar dragon. Like, okay, I could get one thing, but it has to be small because I'm going to eat the whole thing, and just one piece of chocolate and one this and this. Maybe I should have one more. Did they see me take like a handful of, the M&Ms or what? It was always, it was like dessert math. I was like, okay, they had a few bites. Like I can have one more. It was so crazy how much space it takes over in your head. And then the social aspect of like having these issues in public and like not wanting to share, kind of like wanting to hide that. And it's really uncomfortable, and it goes really, really deep. And so to free yourself up from all of that, from the shame of the cravings and the overeating and the closet eating and yeah, just like you said, we have so much more space when we don't have to be thinking every 5 seconds, okay, where am I going to eat? What am I going to, it's like, it'll happen. I'll get food, Yeah. So really powerful. It really is incredible. Like, I think if you take one thing out of your story in this entire session, it's that, like, the freedom that's possible by just changing this one thing. Like, it really truly is. But I am also, like, there was another piece of that I want to dig into, which is the like signs, right? The things that we don't even recognize as signs that there is issues with blood sugar, with their insulin. And because it affects everybody's a little bit different. I'm sure you're an expert on this, so I don't have to tell you that, but I would love to just dive into that. Like, what are those signs that people, would you call them early warning signs, the things that you were looking up that's not really out there? How do you know if this is something that's affecting your life? Yeah. And I love and want to stress something that you said, that this shows up differently for everybody. Everyone has their own sort of flavor of blood sugar and insulin issues, and they can show up. And it's not like, oh, if you have these 3 symptoms, you're pre-diabetic. If you have these symptoms, you can feel these symptoms all along this spectrum of metabolic health or, diabetes and insulin resistance. So it's not an on and off switch like type 1 diabetes, where it's like your pancreas no longer works. That's an autoimmune disease. Unfortunately, there is no known cure. So you have to use insulin. That's an on and off switch. You either have type 1 diabetes or you don't. Type 2 diabetes slowly, gradually develops over decades. And all the while, insulin resistance is sort of happening underneath that. So the very first signs that something is going a little bit wrong with your blood sugar are that this typically happens if a meal is delayed, or you have to push a meal back, or times when you feel hungry. And this would be things like anxiety, which is a huge one. I can't tell you how many people get anxious and they don't realize it's their blood sugar. So the anxiety, shakiness, dizziness, lightheadedness, weakness, fatigue, feeling brain fog, irritability, a lot of mood symptoms. So a lot of things that impact the brain, because what's happening is that the brain is running out of energy. And so all of a sudden it can't function as well as it should be. And so it's sensing
that you are running low on energy, and it almost like puts on that gaslight in the car, right? So those symptoms are the gaslight coming on. And another one is that we get cravings. We get cravings for high carbohydrate foods. So it's like, let me just run to Starbucks. Let me just run in the gas station and grab a bar or something like that, or have an energy drink. So we're running out of energy, and the brain is sending us these signals to go get more food. And so what do? We eat those higher carb. It's not saying like, you're a little hungry, why don't you cook up a nice grass-fed steak and some broccoli and, grass-fed butter? It's not going to tell you that. It's going to tell you, hey, we need to get food. So the more the metabolic dysfunction progresses, the more urgent those symptoms will be. So we'll have intense and urgent hunger. Sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, I need to eat right now, or, I'm going to bite someone's head off. Think about those Snickers commercials where someone turns into Joe Pesci and then they eat a Snickers and they're better. That is a perfect sign of blood sugar dysregulation. Right there. Yeah.
So it's not normal to be hangry.
No, it is very glorified. There's shirts that say #hangry. If you are hangry, it's not a personality trait. It's a blood sugar issue, and it could be fixed.
Say that again, because that is like, who dropped the mic right there. Yeah. That is insane.
Yeah. So hangry is not a personality trait. It's a blood sugar issue, and it can be fixed. And it's a sign that there's something going on. So healthy hunger. So right now it's 12:30 p.m. my time, and I typically eat lunch around 12 o'clock. So, but I didn't have time today. So I'm here talking, using my brain, and I feel fine, right? And that's the difference. That's healthy hunger. My body can push it off a little bit because I have stored fuel all over the rest of my body. It's saying, oh, we don't have a lot of glucose coming in. Maybe I'll just burn some of this glucose from her liver, or maybe I'll just, burn some body fat from her arms or whatever. And so a healthy metabolism that produces healthy hunger has the ability to access all different macronutrients, so carbs, fats, and proteins, as fuel, and it can access the stored energy that we have on our body. Body fat is stored energy. And so if we have excess body fat, but no energy, we have something blocking the body from accessing it, right? That makes sense. So typically what happens is that we have high insulin levels, and insulin, it tells the body, store fat, store. So it's a storage hormone. We can't be in a fat burning mode the same time we're in a fat storage mode. So if we have these high insulin levels from overeating carbohydrates, especially the refined kind, from eating vegetable oils, from snacking too often, from high stress, from lack of movement, we get these higher insulin levels over time, and they block the body from using the stored sugar in the liver called glycogen, and they block the body from accessing its own body fat. And that's a really big problem. And when we can't utilize those macronutrients very well, or the stored energy, we can get those signs of low blood sugar. And it's like, dude, I just fed you, but we need to eat again. So for me, for most cases, it's an energy utilization problem. And the way to help that is to lower those insulin levels. And we can do that by stop spiking our blood sugar, which would give us more insulin. And then, there's a lot of other things that we can do, but those are some of the basics. So to kind of go back, these early signs: anxiety, dizziness, shakiness, headaches, fatigue, brain fog, difficulty concentrating, cravings, irritability, hanger. Some people get even worse. They have heart palpitations. They start sweating. They feel really hot. Some people pass out. And then, unfortunately, we can have blood sugar issues basically every single organ and cell of our body, because our blood sugar affects every single cell, organ, and process in our body. So therefore, if it's not working for us, it can be impacting those systems negatively. So we know that over time, as the blood sugar dysregulation worsens, as the insulin levels keep rising, we start to see widespread impacts all over the body. So we could see someone with, all those brain symptoms that I mentioned. And as it progresses, we can have memory loss and dementia. Alzheimer's is being called type 3 diabetes. So it progresses really badly. Then we have, macular degeneration in the eyes are very common in people with diabetes, where their blood sugar goes really high over a long time. We know that sugar causes tooth decay. We know that insulin spikes can cause acne, can cause darkening of the skin folds in the neck. It can cause us to not be able to let go of weight. We already talked about, because our body can't burn our own body fat. It impacts our heart. It's insulin resistance is the leading cause of having high blood pressure and cardiovascular disease. We know that eating a lot of sugar can deplete our magnesium stores, which relaxes our heart. And so if we have not enough magnesium from overeating sugar, we can develop arrhythmias. We know it can impact our gut flora. It can impact our adrenal glands from the highs and the lows of the blood sugar. That's very stressful. So then our whole hormonal system goes out of whack, and our insulin levels are very impactful on our sex hormones, which is why I developed PCOS after having these high insulin levels. And when I got the insulin levels down, my sex hormones normalized. So we see a lot of impacts on the female and male reproductive system. So all that hormonal imbalances, as well as infertility. So you can just go down the line and pick an organ, any organ, and you're going to see that you can have impacts there. And so it seems to be, it's like, oh, I have PCOS and acne, and I crave, I need to eat every so often, and I get tendonitis. Like, how is that all related? Like, it's surprisingly related through that thread of blood sugar.
Crazy. And when you think about this, like when you really listen to it and how it's all connected, and then you go, why are we doing this to ourselves? Like, why don't more people know that what sugar and what not having your blood sugar regulated and doing the right thing is actually doing to your body? It's literally killing us. I mean, Alzheimer's, type 2 diabetes, all those things, PCOS, all these things. And yet we think it's normal. Is that like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest problems is that these early signs of blood sugar issues, where a big one is fatigue, right? So we're really tired. So we wake up in the morning and we have coffee, and then we get a headache, and it's like, oh, let me go grab something. And then we eat some sugar, we have another coffee, and we feel better. And then we are a little anxious in the afternoon, so we pop an anti-anxiety pill. And then at night, we're super wired and we can't fall asleep. So we have a sleeping pill, and then we wake up and we have a headache, but maybe it's because we didn't eat. And so we have ibuprofen. So we are self-medicating because we don't know this thread. And so if you're taking painkillers and, energy pills, or like having coffee and energy drinks all the time, you're having sleeping pills. These are all things that can get so much better with blood sugar. It's just that little is known about this. And the hardest part is that you go to your doctor and they'll say, oh, your blood sugar is under 100, you're fine. And that's not the case. My blood sugar was 60. I was not fine. I see so many people, their blood sugar fasting is 90. They're not fine. They don't feel well. So we can have so many issues. But the problem with doctors is that their only tool is a prescription pad or a scalpel. And we cannot medicate these early signs of blood sugar dysregulation. So we can see how this could be lost. And then we have snack companies and big food companies, sponsoring the Dietetics Association, and, not to knock RDs as people, but their programs are sponsored by big food companies. So they say all foods can fit, and they're saying don't demonize any food group. And it's like, that's not really a helpful message. And we're missing the mark. And then with doctors, once the blood sugar gets progressed enough, then they can give you things like metformin. And that's a big problem because it's been progressing for years and decades, and it's already taken its toll. And there's nothing that can give you really for insulin resistance. So they don't even test for it. And meanwhile, over 88% of the population has such advanced insulin resistance that it's now called metabolic syndrome. And so this is which used to be called insulin resistance syndrome. So this is really impacting us on a huge scale. And there's just not enough known, especially because people are going to their doctors and they're being told they're fine, or it can't be their blood sugar. It's like, oh, I have anxiety all the time and my blood sugar comes back normal, just the fasting number. And they're like, oh, well, you're fine. So it can't be your blood sugar. And meanwhile, it is. So I see this, constantly. And I see people when they fix their blood sugar, they get off, anxiety, bipolar meds that they've been on for decades. And it's just unreal.
Well, the really sad part is that doctors, if you tell your doctor you have anxiety, the last thing they're probably going to test you for is blood sugar. They won't
Absolutely.
make that connection for you.
No.
Yeah. And it really is, it's crazy. And but once you start to understand this, you can't unknow it. You have to that's where you have to start to pay attention to it. And it's so huge. I'm really curious, because I know that you work with so many people, but what is the biggest way that you see people sabotaging themselves or doing keto wrong or kind of just missing the mark when it comes to figuring out their blood sugar issues?
So I see in my practice, I see several different things. And one of them is just trying to copy what someone else does. And I'm really into bioindividuality. When I went back to nutrition school to try to heal myself because it's hard. So your natural instinct, because you're not a nutritionist, is going to be to copy what someone else does. But what I do when I teach in my programs, Blood Sugar Mastery, and with my clients, I teach them how to understand how their body feels and what they might need. And what I see with a lot of people, because I work with a lot of people who have this tendency towards the low blood sugar, so all this hangriness, and a lot of people will go keto and it's like, oh, it solved it. It got so much better. That was my case. But a lot of people can't go keto yet, and they can't go low carb yet. And they go too fast. So if your blood sugar is crashing all the time, if you're relating to that, and it's even more severe than mine was, your doctor might say, you need to go low carb, and you'll take out the carbs and you'll feel terrible because your body has such metabolic inflexibility that it can't access those other fuel sources. So your blood sugar is going to be super, super low. I hear this all the time. People are like, I felt like I was going to die for 2 weeks. I think I just need carbs, and the carbs aren't working well. So that's really where we need to get into that nuance. So a lot of these people, the name for a lot of this is if you eat and then your blood sugar crashes after you eat, that's called reactive hypoglycemia. And sometimes this happens to people and their blood sugar is not even going low. It's low in comparison, but sometimes in the 100s, 110, their blood sugar goes below that and they start to feel all those symptoms I was just talking about. And so if that's the case, you can't go keto or low carb yet. You have to work your way there gradually while supporting your body, supporting the adrenals, supporting minerals. This is it's a very nuanced thing that you need help with because the information out there for that is horrible. And I haven't yet seen many people know how to help people reverse this once it's gotten pretty severe. The other thing that I see is that a lot of people struggle to adequately digest protein and fat, and that really impacts their ability to get those nutrients assimilated into their bodies. So what happens is they go keto or they go low carb and they're like, I know I need to lower my carbs. So they increase their proteins and definitely their fats, and they start to feel bad. They start to maybe have to run to the bathroom. Maybe they get constipated. Maybe they have heartburn. Maybe the food kind of sits in their stomach like a rock. Maybe they just don't really have a taste for all this meat and they can't really do it. And maybe when they eat fat, it just kind of like runs right through them, or they start to feel just inflamed and they just don't feel well. They feel nauseous. And then they're like averse to the food that they're supposed to be eating. So then a lot of them just don't really eat much at all. They don't know what to eat. They think I can't do keto. Maybe they don't have a gallbladder. And this is a huge piece too. So when I went back to nutritional therapy school, we learned all about digestion. And it was the most fascinating thing that I learned. And I see that everyone has a digestive tract. And so we could all use a lot of help in this area, but especially for people who are struggling with all those symptoms that I mentioned. So if that's the case for you, chances are you may have low stomach acid, low pancreatic enzymes, or poor bile function, or maybe you don't have a gallbladder. And if that's the case, you need to get these supports for those different areas of digestion, not just take a probiotic, because that's the large intestine. So digestion happens in this north to south process. And we need to address all the steps of digestion, because if something goes wrong, if we don't have enough stomach acid, then every step in the chain of digestion after that is going to be affected and impacted. And that's going to lead to an imbalance of the bad bacteria in our gut. It's going to lead to reduced breakdown of the food so that we can't absorb our nutrients. Because if we go back and think about it, what is digestion? Digestion is, again, not an on and off switch. It's not like a blender where like you put the food in, you blend it, it's done. It's like, It's not like I put the food in, I digest, and then it comes out. That's not what digestion is. You put the food in, and it's a very intricate process depending on the step after it. And it's the process of breaking down food so we can extract and absorb nutrients. It's how we get nutrients that become us, that power our body. Our bodies run on nutrients. They don't run on sunshine and calories, unfortunately. So we need the nutrients to power our body to stabilize our blood sugar. If we don't have enough chromium, if we don't have enough magnesium, if we don't have B vitamins, if we don't have zinc, if we don't have biotin, there's these certain nutrients that we need to regulate our blood sugar. Our adrenals need minerals. Every single organ needs different nutrients. And sometimes we need fats. Sometimes we need the proteins. We need the amino acids. So we need all these macro and micronutrients to run our body. And if we can't digest properly, no matter how healthy our diet is, no matter how organic, grass-fed, pasture-raised our diets are, if we cannot digest and absorb our nutrients, we're going to have very expensive poop and we are not going to feel optimal, right? And so digestion then becomes the number one healing priority of our body, because it's how we get the nutrients needed to do any sort of healing. And pairing these together in my program, Blood Sugar Mastery, we talk, module number 2 is all about digestion. We have to talk about it that early, because this is what I see people getting wrong with keto, is that it's just, maybe they have a plateau, maybe it was working, and then they just, they have these recurrent digestive issues. And sometimes even if you're like, well, I go to the bathroom every day, no problem, like clockwork, I'm fine. You might not be fine. Like you might be fine, but not optimal, right? So there's all these areas that we can improve. Like, who knew that burping after your meal means you have low stomach acid, or that if your fingernails chip and peel, or if you're anemic, and if you have undigested food in your stool, that means low stomach acid and low digestive enzymes. So we don't know these things, and we don't come with a manual. So it's really helpful to work with a practitioner to help really dial in those aspects of digestion that you don't even think about. So
it's fascinating. And because it all is so interconnected. I mean, I guess on some level, like, we know that it's one body, it has to be somewhat interconnected. And yet our modern medicine doesn't really treat our body like it's all interconnected, right? You have a headache, 100%. Take an Advil, but you're not thinking about how that Advil is affecting your gut health and what it's doing to you in other areas. And same thing with the anxiety medicine or any of the other things that you're doing, the sugar and it's all impacting all the pieces. And it really, truly is fascinating. So I feel like I could talk about this with you all day.
I just forgot to say one more important thing, and then I will pause. The other really important thing that I see with the digestion and the blood sugar piece is that if you can't digest and absorb your fats and your proteins, you're going to have a really hard time stabilizing your blood sugar. And so that's the other piece of it. That's the one of the most direct connections we see. And also bacterial balance in the gut. That also has a big impact on our blood sugar levels. But when we eat, we don't digest well. It becomes very inflammatory to our body. And then we don't have those fatty acids to utilize to burn to stabilize our blood sugar. So it's going to drive a dependence or an over-reliance on carbohydrates, which we are wanting to reduce. So that's another sort of tie between those.
Yeah. That is huge. So what would you say is a specific action step someone could take right away to get started like on the right path, right? I feel like it's a long journey. I mean, there's a lot of different things, but what would be like step number one?
So if you are experiencing any of those low blood sugar symptoms that I was talking about, you're getting hangry, and even I see this in the low carb community. If we say low carb, it doesn't, like, people think, oh, I need to lower my carbs. But what often happens is they might raise protein a little bit, but if we've lived through the 80s and 90s, we might be a little fat phobic. So what we need to do is really increase the fats on our plate. So getting the fattiest cut of meat, adding avocados or a handful of nuts or grass-fed butter or olive oil, or having fatty fish, or if you tolerate it, full fat grass-fed dairy. So getting these fats on our plate, not just like, oh, I had a hamburger patty and then I'm just going to do some lettuce. Like, that's not enough fat. So multiple, sources of fat on your plate can really, really, really be supportive of helping you go longer between meals and not crash after your meal. So if you do have reactive hypoglycemia, like I talked about, your doctor will say, oh, eat a complex carb and protein at every meal. They don't say anything about fat. And that's the missing piece for so many people. We want to have protein, absolutely, but get your fats with your protein. So the fattiest cuts of meat, and then add those extra fats to your plate and see what that does. And then I feel like I also need to give something for digestion. Apple cider vinegar I feel like I should be sponsored by apple cider vinegar, because not only does it lower the blood sugar and insulin response of your meals, it also increases stomach acid and bile acids. So it can actually help your digestion in the meantime. So it helps blood sugar and digestion. So having 1 tablespoon in a very small amount of water, throw a pinch of cinnamon in there for the taste, but having that right before your meal can really help. So a lot of people will say, oh, I have apple cider vinegar in a big glass of water every morning. That might have other benefits, but that's not specifically for the blood sugar and digestive benefits that I'm talking about. So swap that out for the 1 tablespoon in 2 inches of water, pinch of cinnamon, and kind of shoot that like a few minutes before your meal. And that will help with the blood sugar response and also help you digest it a little bit better. So that can be really supportive.
I love that. That's a great tip, because I've always, known that apple cider vinegar is really good for you. And my stepmom swears by it, that has the glass every morning and is always talking about it. She got me onto it. But I always wondered, like, is there a different way that you should be taking it that's more healthy? So that's super, super helpful. I love that.
Yeah.
Danielle, this was amazing. This seriously was so much like really good information packed into such a short amount of time. I know that you have some amazing resources to help take this even further. Do you want to talk about those for a second?
Yeah. So the reactive hypoglycemia masterclass is if you are relating to any of these blood sugar dropping or low blood sugar symptoms, which incidentally, these symptoms can also show up when your blood sugar is really, really high. So one time, the other day, I got someone sent me a paleo cereal and it was like gluten-free, glyphosate-free, organic, this and that. So I had it and I had a CGM on. My blood sugar spiked to like 168. I've never seen it that high in my life. So just remember that gluten-free doesn't mean spike-free. Just because something's paleo doesn't mean you won't get a blood sugar spike. At the very peak of that spike, do you know what my brain thought? It thought, go have more cereal. Do we have ice cream in the house? Maybe you should get chocolate. I was like, what the heck? It was crazy. It was like my mind was taken over. My sugar dragon woke up and was just like spitting orders at me, like, go have more cereal. I was like, that's crazy. And it happened at the peak of a spike. So these symptoms can happen sort of anywhere on the blood sugar. So it could be if our blood sugar is peaking, if our blood sugar is crashing, if it's on the way down too fast. But anyway, if you're relating to this and you definitely feel like you might have those low blood sugar symptoms, you can't go very long between meals, you're definitely getting those cravings, maybe the anxiety, the shakiness between meals, that would be a really good thing to watch, the Reactive Hypoglycemia Masterclass. And if you get I think it's the all access pass, that's included. Yeah, that's included as the bonus that I offer. And I also have more resources on my website, Danielle Hamilton Health. And I have a really informative Instagram page, also Danielle Hamilton Health, nice and long and hard to spell for everybody. And and then I have my program, Blood Sugar Mastery, which is my signature 8-week program. And I coach you through all of these pieces. So helping you find it's basically like individualized coaching in a group format, because no one is doing the exact same thing. It's really teaching you what you need to do next with your blood sugar. So are you a person who's tried keto and it hasn't worked for you? Maybe we need to look at digestion. Maybe we need to look at the foods you are eating or your stress levels or, those type of things. Maybe your blood sugar is crashing all the time and you're not a good candidate for keto right now and you need to slowly lower that. So that's sort of the journey that we go on. And we look at all these foundations of our health. We look at movement, we look at stress, we look at sleep and micronutrients and all sorts of stuff to really help you have a full, profound improvement in every single area of your health.
Amazing. It sounds so interesting. I am like, I gotta get in on that class. That's my next class. I love it.
Yes.
Danielle, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you so much for sharing your story and just amazing, amazing tips. I'm so grateful for you. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you. You too.
Wow, right? So many truth bombs in that interview. It's probably going to take you a few days to digest all of that incredible information. But in the meantime, it would mean so much to me if you are enjoying this content to subscribe or follow the podcast on iTunes or wherever you like to listen. And not only that, if you know anyone else who would find this content useful, then please, please, please be sure to share it with them. Send them a text, share it on social, share it via email, wherever you want to share it, just share it. And then finally, because this podcast is so brand new, your reviews on iTunes are a huge deal. So if you feel so inclined to leave a review, that would be absolutely amazing. Then be sure to take a screenshot and send it to us at hello@thinlicious.com, because we will be choosing listeners at random every week to win a whole bunch of fabulous prizes. And of course, if you have any questions or you want to connect or you have any ideas for future episodes, you can always shoot me an email at hello@thinlicious.com. And then I will see you back here very soon for our next episode, where we will be talking about a topic that I am literally obsessed with: gut health. It's going to be good, guys. I'll see you then.